And we're back here at Trade Profit Accelerator. This lesson is Forged by Fire rules. And we are in week 1 planning still. And this is day 3, Forged by Fire rules. So that's where we are in the course. And here's what we're going to cover. I'm going to tell a little astronaut story from a book I read. Then we're going to talk about boldface creation, which kind of spawns from the astronaut story. And I'm going to get into other lessons from air and space, and then we're going to cap it off with diamonds and the strongest steel. Okay? And what this can do for you is it can entertain you on some air and space stories. And it can also give you ideas on how things evolve over time. And you're going to see what I mean when we get into it. But it can also arm you with useful rules to live by, as well as give you inspiration to challenge yourself. Okay? So great things that this can do for you. And let's get right into the astronaut story here. So this is information that I got from reading Chris Hadfield's book, An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth. Super cool book, highly recommended. He was a top grad of the U.S. Air Force Test Pilot School in 1988, and he spent decades training and logged over 4,000 hours in space. In May 2013, he returned to Earth after serving as commander of the International Space Station for 5 months. Okay? He's one of the most seasoned and accomplished astronauts on the planet. And through his book, he introduced me to the term boldface. The boldface is the big bold text in front of you when you're in the cockpit of a fighter jet. It contains actions to perform to prevent damage, injury, or death. And it's said that the boldface is written in blood because many of the instructions are because of accidental fatalities that could have been prevented. So pilots must know these instructions by heart before even attempting to fly. And this story inspired me to create a boldface of my own for trading. And that is going to get us into the boldface creation. So it's not a long list, but these rules came from the most painful of my experiences trading. Okay? So some of these rules could definitely save your trading career. Rule number 1, never bet the house. Okay, we talked about position sizing in day 2 yesterday, if you watched yesterday. And you really want to keep your position sizing small because that could be your Achilles heel, right? Rule number 2, don't be greedy, set targets, take profits. Rule number 3, only invest in the best, right? Best opportunity. That's the only thing you should be invested in. Rule number 4, cut losses early and often. Can't emphasize that enough. Other lessons from air and space. So we're going to get into some stories here and some timelines. This is going to be super fun. So the Wright brothers are a great example of entrepreneurial spirit. This was an amazing story. It took 4 years of research and development from first idea to the first prototype. And then one day, December 17th, 1903, with Orville at the controls, something spectacular happened that would change the world forever. In a small open field in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the U.S. became the first country in the flight in the world. In the first country in flight in the world. There's an extra "the" in there. I got to edit that out. Okay, so yeah, America was first in flight. North Carolina was first in flight. They have that claim to fame on their license plates, right? And a seemingly small 12-second event, that's right, the first flight was only 12 seconds, but it forever transformed our civilization. And it's easy to see, looking at the first prototype, how they needed a lot of faith to continue, right? This picture's seconds into that first flight. And it wasn't until 9 years later that the first all-metal plane flew in Europe, and that looks scary as shit as well. Okay, so it wasn't until 1914 that the first commercial flight was offered. It was a little 17-mile flight from, I think it was St. Augustine to Tampa or something like that in Florida. And one lucky guy got the first flight, the first commercial flight. I would have been scared out of my mind. I think it was the mayor of the town, paid in today's dollars, would have been thousands of dollars. But yeah, he got the first ride. So, and then by 1918, just a few years, 4 years after that first commercial flight, there was 145,000 military airplanes built during World War I. Okay, so quite the jump, and the spurt in growth, I think, can be attributed to the war. So that is pretty obvious on this timeline. But yeah, you can see it from, there was one plane in 1903, right? And in 1912, there was 2 metal planes. I'm not sure how many other planes, but probably not many more. And 1915, I say 100-ish, but I couldn't really find exact numbers, so I just said 100. I think in 1915 the Germans made like 52 planes or something for the war efforts, but other than that, I really couldn't find that much data out there. And then there was exponential growth, right? When they started really getting down the model and the parts and everything involved and having the engine built and stuff like that. Okay, so that was the timeline of flights to really mass production of the planes. So super cool. And then the next big thing, decades later, was the space race, right? So it wasn't until 1961 that the idea to go to the moon was suggested by John F. Kennedy, right? He said, we choose to go to the moon. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they're easy, but because they are hard, right? That's what he said. So super inspirational speech, and I just love this quote. And what Kennedy did here was pure genius. He set a deadline, right? He said before the end of the decade. Before the end of the decade is what he said in his speech. And this gave the entire nation a goal to get behind with a specific timeline. There was a deadline. And that's what made it so profound. And miraculously, it came true. Unfortunately, he didn't live to see it, but they met his deadline. They did it before the end of the decade. You see the timeline here, you really have to wonder how long it would have taken if he didn't say that, right? So first U.S. space mission 58, first human piloted 61, first unmanned liftoff from the moon 67, and then man on the moon 1969. We landed on the moon. Okay, so super cool timeline there. And by not setting that deadline, there's no telling really how long it would have taken. It's been over 50 years since we've had someone walk on the moon. I looked it up. 1972 was the last time we had a person on the moon. I don't know why. I guess nobody set another deadline. So that's it for the lessons from air and space here. Now we're going to talk about diamonds and the strongest steel in the universe. Diamonds form from immense forces. Maybe you knew this. Only when a combination of the high enough temperatures and pressures, the pressure is 50,000 times the pressure of the Earth's surface, when the temperature is 1600 degrees Celsius, or if you're in America like me, 2912 degrees Fahrenheit. It's kind of hard to imagine and put a real analogy to that temperature there, but it also takes 1 billion to 3.3 billion years, so kind of tough to comprehend the timeline there too. And underneath that immense pressure and temperature over that long of a time, the carbon atoms crystallize to diamonds. And diamonds are the hardest naturally occurring substance on Earth. So that's how they're formed. And similarly, the strongest steel is formed from the hottest furnaces, right? The strongest metal in terms of tensile strength is tungsten steel, and it has a tensile strength of 1725 megapascals. Again, kind of hard to imagine megapascals, at least for me in the US, dealing in pounds per square inch. But there's the conversion. 1 megapascal is equal to 145 pounds per square inch. Therefore, that many megapascals is 250,000 psi is the pressure required to pull apart tungsten. Okay, so maybe don't get the tungsten wedding band because they might not be able to cut that shit off, right? So maybe go with like the white gold or something if you're thinking about tying the knot. Okay, so tungsten has the highest melting point of any of the metals, and that makes sense, right? The strongest steel is formed from the hottest furnaces, and the steel can be pounded and struck repeatedly to shape only once it's hot enough. And it's the fire that gives the steel the power to be flexible, and the blows give it strength. And you're probably saying to yourself, so what, right? How can this help me? And we're gonna get into that right now. So if you have had the unfortunate experience of losing 90% of their savings, remember this when times get really tough. Maybe you've experienced some tough times already, and statistics show 1 in 3 traders loses 90% or more, and we'll get into more stats in week 3. But it's what you decide to do with those extra intense moments that will shape your life, and that's the importance of it. Are you going to freeze and stop trading, or are you going to hammer your trade plan into better shape? That's your choice. The strongest traders are the ones that have experienced the roughest conditions. Get the analogy? Hopefully it's starting to sink in a little bit. Study the best traders and see what obstacles they've overcome, right? And the big idea here is to use your own tough moments to shape your plan and make it stronger. Bang it out when it's hot and uncomfortable. Bang it out. Okay, so that's basically it for today. Talked about the astronaut story with Chris Hadfield. Great book. You should totally get it. Boldface creation, the rules for yourself that you're going to create. Or you could just take my rules too. They're written in blood for sure, written in all massive losses that I've taken in my trading career. Other lessons from air and space were super cool. The timelines, the planes, spacecrafts, setting deadlines, super important stuff to remember. And then diamonds and strong steel are formed from the hottest flames, right? So the action item for today is to create your own boldface to live by. If you didn't already get that idea already, you really do want to think of your own biggest setbacks in your life and build the set of rules to follow based on that. Your biggest failures should be your starting thing. But also others around you, maybe they had big failures that you could learn from as well. Okay? It doesn't all have to be your own experiences. You can learn from others. That's really how you get ahead. And then I do suggest to print out these rules and post them above your workplace so that they're staring you in the face, just like the bold face in the Jets, right? Okay, so that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in to this whole lesson. I will see you in the next lesson.